Now, a man has been arrested in connection with one of those. According to officials familiar with the investigation, Nolan Wells' official autopsy is complete.
For the first time since Nolan Wells vanished near Horn Island, two massive developments just collided in a single 24-hour window. Thousands of miles away from where his body was recovered, federal agents made a sudden, unexpected move in Sacramento, California. Not local police, not the sheriff's office, the FBI. And at the exact same moment, officials confirmed the one thing people have been waiting nearly a month to hear. Nolan's state autopsy is officially complete. If you've been following this case online, you probably saw those two headlines drop and assumed the piece you were missing just fell into place. It didn't. In fact, what just landed on the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's desk and what the FBI actually uncovered in California exposes a far stranger, far more dangerous layer to this story than anyone realized. Because locked inside those federal arrest documents is a single line, a line that proves the man in custody wasn't acting at random, and that someone was using the public's theories to pick a target. Meanwhile, a sealed medical report is sitting behind closed doors right now for one specific reason, a reason the district attorney stated on camera, but almost nobody caught. Tonight, we unpack the arrest, the missing piece of the autopsy, and what actually happens when an investigation goes completely quiet, and the internet fills in the blanks.
The investigation into the death of Nolan Wells has drawn many into the crosshairs with the rise of tensions on social media. Death threats have been sent to Nolan's family as well as the families of Nolan's friends.
His name is Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarce, 27 years old. Sacramento, California. He was arrested and charged on Thursday with interstate transmission of a threatening communication. That's a federal offense. Title 18, the kind of charge that exists because the internet made it possible to terrorize someone in a state you've never set foot in. The maximum penalty is 5 years in federal prison, a fine of up to $250,000, 3 years of supervised release after that. He is charged, he is not convicted. Everything in the court documents is an allegation, and he's entitled to the presumption of innocence like anyone else. And it's worth understanding why this is federal at all, because that's not a detail. It's the whole reason the Bureau is in this story. A threat made in Mississippi to someone in Mississippi is a Mississippi problem. A threat sent from California into Mississippi crosses a line that turns it into a federal one. The statute exists precisely for this, for the person who never leaves the house, never buys a plane ticket, never goes anywhere near the target, and terrorizes them anyway, from a keyboard 2 time zones out. That's also why it can move faster than people expect. There's no extradition fight, no jurisdictional handoff between counties. Federal agents work it end to end, from the message to the arrest. But the allegations are specific. According to those documents, the messages went out over Facebook Messenger from an account using the handle Yayayay962. Not a burner phone, not an anonymous forum, a social media account with a login history. That turned out to matter. Investigators traced the email address tied to that Facebook account, then the IP addresses behind it. Google records surfaced a physical address in Sacramento. From there, they cross-referenced a date of birth, a phone number, street addresses, and cell phone data to place him. It's not exotic police work, it's paperwork, subpoenas, and spreadsheets, the kind of thing that takes a couple of weeks and produces a name. And here's what makes it land the way it lands. One of the messages allegedly sent from that account included a line about the FBI. A line saying, in substance, that not even the Bureau could stop what was coming. The Bureau read that message. The Bureau traced that account. The Bureau put him in custody. He is one of several people accused of threatening this same family, the first arrested, not the only one accused. And federal agents are working the interstate threats connected to this case as a separate track, running alongside the Jackson County Sheriff's Department investigation into how Nolan died. 2 investigations, 2 different questions. They are not the same case, and this is the part that keeps getting lost every time this story gets summarized in a headline. One is asking what happened on that island. The other is asking who's been sending packages or coming messages to people who weren't on it, which brings us to the woman who opened them. Her name is Ashley Cole. She's a Chancery judge in Jackson County, Mississippi. Chancery Court. That's not criminal court. Chancery handles divorces, custody, estates, guardianships, land disputes, property lines, and probate. A Chancery judge in Jackson County has no jurisdiction over a death investigation and no role in a grand jury proceeding of this kind. She has no involvement in the Nolan Wells investigation whatsoever. She isn't a witness. She wasn't consulted. She has no authority over the sheriff's department, no authority over the medical examiner, no say in what gets released or when. She was not on Horn Island. She was not on the boat. She has never been accused by any authority of anything connected to Nolan Wells' death, because there is nothing to accuse her of. So sit with that for a second, because it's the whole point of this video. A sitting judge with no connection to the facts of a case received messages describing an explosive device being delivered to her office. And she is not the only person in her household who's been getting them. Her family says the threats have come in the thousands, not dozens, thousands, since the day Nolan Wells was reported missing. Why? Ashley Cole's stepson is a young man named Warren Hudson. Warren was one of the friends who traveled to Horn Island with Nolan Wells on the 4th of July. That's it. That's the connection. He was on the trip, he came back. His stepmother is a judge, and because his stepmother's name is publicly searchable in a way a teenager's isn't, she became the address the internet had for the family. Warren has publicly denied any involvement in Nolan's death. He sat for a lengthy interview with commentator Brandon Tatum on Tatum's show, pushing back directly against the allegations circulating online about Nolan's friends. In that same interview, a claim surfaced that Nolan had been seen after the group separated. That is a claim made in an interview. It is not an established fact. It has not been confirmed by investigators, and this channel isn't going to present it as anything more than what it is. Warren has not been charged with anything. Neither has anyone else who was on that island. His father, Dr. Benjamin Hudson, is the one who described the volume of threats the family has taken, and this week, that family is not the only one lawyering up. A friend of Nolan Wells, one of the young men from that trip, has retained counsel over the death threats he's been receiving. A New Orleans rapper and an OnlyFans model have reportedly been served with cease and desist letters over content about the case. An Ocean Springs family has announced plans to pursue legal recourse against online content creators they say are responsible for false accusations and threats made against them. Read that last one again if you make content about this case. Because here's the thing about the accusations flying around online. The people making them have no more information than you do. They're not reading the sealed autopsy. They're not sitting in the sheriff's interview room. They have the same public statements, the same photos, the same audio file, and a comment section rewarding whoever says the most shocking thing about it. And the threats have not gone in one direction. Christine Wansley, Nolan's mother, a woman who buried her 18-year-old son this month, has reported threats made against her as well. Think about the shape of that. A grieving mother and the stepmother of one of her son's friends, both receiving threats from opposite ends of the same argument about the same dead teenager. Nobody in that sentence has been charged with anything. None of this happened in a vacuum. It happened in one. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department acknowledged the problem early, back on July 8, 2 days after the body was recovered. The statement noted the speculation circulating on social media and said investigators were working to establish the facts through eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and other reliable information. Facts, evidence, reliable information. Meanwhile, everything the public could actually get its hands on was fragmentary. A distress call, a handful of photographs, a sheriff saying no initial indication of a crime, which read to a lot of people as a conclusion rather than a status update. And the district attorney's office has defended keeping the details out of public view while the investigation is active, which is legally sound and which also guarantees that for weeks, The loudest voice in the room belongs to whoever is willing to speculate. That's the trade. Protect the integrity of the case, and you concede the narrative to people with no obligation to be right. The family has felt that from the other side. They've been waiting on the same silence, with infinitely more at stake, and their attorney has been publicly pushing against it the entire time.
We need people who were there, who actually witnessed it. Those are the people we need to call, because this is the thing. At the end of the day, if the roles were reversed, and say if Nolan saw something happen to one of his friends, or even not one of his friends, just anyone. Nolan was the type of kid or young man that would have been like, hey, mom, dad, look, I saw this crazy event. What should I do?
Ben Crump was in Nashville on Thursday at the National Urban League Conference, giving updates on Nolan's case alongside two others: the death of Daniel Irving, a teenager who went to a lake in Texas with two other teens in April and did not come home, and the case of Tyler Smith. Same pattern, same demand, same weight. So, you had an information void, a grieving family with a national platform, and an audience that had already decided the silence meant something. Into that space came the content. Thousands of videos, reconstructions built from nothing, names, and then, allegedly a man in Sacramento typing a message about a package. The charging documents include copies of several messages allegedly sent from that account to Judge Cole. I'm going to read the relevant parts once, not for effect, because they're the evidence in a federal case, and they're why a man is in custody. One message says a package is coming to her office in the next few days, that it's gonna blow you away when you see it. Followed by lol, followed by a suggestion that the boys should be there to see it too. Another references blood. How much of it there'd be, how hard it is to clean, especially the message says, from a boat. Especially from a boat. That's the line. That's the one that tells you this wasn't a random stranger with a grudge against a judge. Whoever wrote that had been following the case closely. They knew about the boat. They knew the theory that had built up around the boat. They knew enough to turn it into a taunt. Then the message says hers will be quick. A promise. Another one says he has all her information, that not even the FBI can stop this. That once the package is opened, a timer starts, and then there are maybe 10 seconds left to ask God for forgiveness. 10 seconds. Investigators also allege the messages included threats to strangle Judge Cole's sons, and that some of the messages contain photographs of her children. Her children. That's a person going through a family's photos and attaching them to a death threat because a teenager in that family went on a boat trip. I said I'd read those once, and I have. We're moving on. Nobody needs them repeated for the atmosphere, least of all the family that had to read them first. But before we leave the arrest, one detail worth holding on to. The account allegedly said the FBI couldn't stop it. The FBI traced the account through an email address. That's how this ends. Not with a manhunt, with a subpoena to a tech company. Now the second headline, the one that put Autopsy back in everybody's feed. Officials familiar with the investigation confirmed this week that the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office has completed the official autopsy of Nolan Xavier Wells. Complete? Finished? Done. The results have not been made public, and they're not going to be, not yet. Here's what happens instead. The report goes to the Jackson County coroner, Bruce Lind Jr. Once the sheriff's department finishes its investigation, the entire case file, including that autopsy, gets presented to a grand jury. And this is the part where the internet consistently gets it wrong. So let's be precise. A grand jury is not a trial. It's not an indictment. It's not a signal that somebody is about to be charged. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath addressed this directly in a video released on July 23rd. Her explanation was about as plain as it gets. Every death in the county, except natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, is presented to the grand jury. Every death. That's the standard procedure, not a special measure for this case. Her office has also confirmed the autopsy report will be withheld until the grand jury can review it. So when you see a headline saying the report is sealed, understand what that means. It doesn't mean someone is hiding it. It means the case is still open, and Mississippi doesn't release findings in an open death investigation before the body that reviews them has seen them. You can think that policy is wrong. Plenty of people do. Plenty of people have said so loudly, and the family's attorneys have pushed hard on exactly this point. But it is the policy. It applied before Nolan Wells' name was ever in the news, and it applies to deaths nobody is watching. The delay itself has an explanation too. The state performed its autopsy on July 7th, the day after the body was recovered. What took the rest of the month wasn't the examination, it was toxicology. Toxicology routinely takes weeks. Standard in death investigations, blood, tissue, the lab queue, that's the wait everybody's been sitting through. And now it's over. For the medical examiner, not for the public.
According to officials familiar with the investigation, Nolan Wells' official autopsy is complete. The results of that autopsy, conducted by the state medical examiner's office, will now be sent to a grand jury.
Which is exactly why the family didn't wait. The Wansleys retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump on July 7th. And they made a decision that told you everything about their level of trust in the process. They had their son's body flown from Mississippi to Washington, D.C. Crump's stated reason was direct. They wanted a doctor with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement to examine their son. The independent autopsy was performed on July 10th, 4 days after the body was found. The pathologist was Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, Jr., board certified and president of the National Medical Association, the oldest and largest organization of black physicians in the United States. It was paid for by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. The preliminary findings were announced on July 22nd at the NAACP National Convention in Chicago to a standing room-only crowd, and the headline finding was 2 words: undetermined, pending. Cause of death: undetermined pending further investigation. Manner of death: undetermined pending further investigation. But underneath those 2 words was a set of details that lit the internet on fire, and they deserve to be laid out carefully, because carefully is the one way they have not been handled. First, the pathologist found red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. There was no skull fracture underneath it, no lacerations to the skin over it. What caused it is not established. Second, there was no evidence of fractures or bruising anywhere. Third, and the report was explicit about this, it did not rule out foul play. That's not the same as finding foul play. It's the absence of a conclusion in either direction, and then the detail that broke containment. When Nolan's body arrived in Washington for the second examination, parts of his throat were not in it. Dr. Mitchell wrote that he therefore could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor or cause of death. That sentence went around the world in about 6 hours. So let's do the thing almost nobody did with it. Dr. Priya Banerjee, a board-certified forensic pathologist with no role in this case, explained the context. Second autopsies carry an inherent limitation. A body that has already been examined is never going to be in a pristine state. Her words: it's never going to be intact or in the condition you'd get with an unexamined body. That's the nature of a second autopsy. Any second autopsy. Tissue is retained during a first examination for testing, and a second examiner receives what's left. Banerjee also noted something else. It is not unusual for an independent examiner to have no access to the findings of the first examination, because state laws limit what can be released while a case is open. None of that proves anything either way. It doesn't clear anyone, and it doesn't accuse anyone. It just means the most inflammatory detail in this entire case has an ordinary forensic explanation that traveled about 1% as far as the detail itself did. Dr. Mitchell listed his own limitations plainly. He couldn't directly observe the airway and lungs for water. He couldn't directly observe the stomach contents. He had no toxicology results at the time of writing, and the independent autopsy did not include toxicology at all. Water in the lungs, stomach contents, toxicology. Those are the 3 things that would speak most directly to a drowning. The family's pathologist had access to none of them. The state's pathologist had all three. That's the gap. That's the entire reason the sealed report matters more than anything else in this story. And Crump has asked that Dr. Mitchell be included when the grand jury hears the death investigation and has called on Mississippi officials to share the state's findings with him. Whether that happens is one of the open questions going into next month. While the medical side has been stalled, the investigative side has not. Investigators have interviewed approximately 60 witnesses reconstructing Nolan Wells' final hours. 60? That's a substantial reconstruction for a case a lot of people online have described as ignored. Here's the frame the evidence sits in. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18, a football player, a senior at Ocean Springs High School in the 2024 season, headed into college ball. On the 4th of July, he traveled by boat with a group of friends to Horn Island, a barrier island, roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Remote, no development, a day trip destination. Officials say the group returned to the mainland without him. He stayed behind on the island. His family reported him missing that night after a phone call came in from one of his friends around 11 p.m. His body was recovered on July 6th along the northwestern shoreline of the island, floating face down. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind told reporters there were no immediate obvious signs of foul play or trauma, and that is precisely why he requested a full state autopsy. His words, so that the medical examiner could determine whether there was any foul play or trauma that wasn't obvious. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said there was no initial indication of a crime. He's also said investigators are working diligently to determine exactly what occurred, that Nolan's family deserves a thorough and factual investigation, and that his office welcomes the family's independent investigation. Authorities have suspected drowning from early on. Suspected, not confirmed. That confirmation is what's sitting in the sealed report. Then there's the audio. At some point that day, someone called for towing assistance for the boat Nolan had been aboard. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released the recording. On it, a teenager tells the operator that a pump stopped working and the boat is sinking. He says they're in 31 feet of water. He says he wants to get the boat unsunk and towed back. Asked how many adults are aboard, he says there are like 7 other people, and that none of them are 21. He says he doesn't have a VHF radio. He gives a location near Horn Island. That audio has since become the most fought-over artifact in the case. An independent audio engineer produced an enhanced version and claimed you can hear voices in the background, including a question about whether someone is dead, someone saying Nolan's name, and someone saying, "Wake up." That is a claim about an enhanced file, made by a party with no official role in the investigation. Sources have told outlets covering the case that the background noise was panic over a boat that was possibly sinking. Audio enhancement is not transcription, it's interpretation. When you amplify a noisy recording, you also amplify the listener's expectations. People reliably hear the words they've been told to listen for. That claim is not verified, and this channel is not going to treat it as though it is. Meanwhile, a former FBI agent, Jennifer Coffindaffer, has reviewed what's publicly known and reached a preliminary read that surveillance footage, witness accounts, Coast Guard communications, and the riptide conditions in that area point toward a tragic accident rather than foul play. She also added a caution that she doubts what's currently known will turn out to be the full truth and that more details could still emerge. That's an outside analyst. Not the investigation, but it's a serious voice, and it's the read that the loudest corners of the internet have spent 3 weeks refusing to consider, because the alternative read has had considerably more amplification. Nolan's mother said at a news conference on July 10th that she absolutely respects law enforcement, but that the accidental drowning framing gave both her and her husband pause. Family and supporters have questioned inconsistencies they say exist in the accounts given by the young men who were with him. Ben Crump has said he has not spoken with those young men because they've obtained legal representation. And the case became national in a way very few death investigations do. Nolan is black. The photos from that trip showed him surrounded by white friends, though at least one other black friend was also on the trip, a detail that gets dropped from the retelling more often than not. In Mississippi, with that history, the speculation about race wrote itself. Al Sharpton and Ben Crump eulogized him at his funeral at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs on July 20th. Terrell Owens attended. Nancy Grace has covered it on her show, saying they're not stopping until they know what happened. Stephen A. Smith pushed for answers in a televised interview, making the point that parents who send their kids out expect them to come home, and the reward money has stacked up. Tyler Perry offered $50,000 for information leading to an arrest. Al Sharpton offered $50,000. Terrell Owens pledged an additional $25,000, $125,000 on the table. And the parents are still, this week, asking the same thing they asked at the beginning. Christine Wansley's appeal has not changed. They need people who were actually there, people who witnessed it. Those are the people who need to come forward because, as she put it, if the roles were reversed, if Nolan had seen something happen to one of his friends, or to anyone at all, he was the kind of young man who'd have gone straight to his parents and said, "Look, I saw this. What do I do?" That's a mother describing her son's character as an argument for someone else's conscience. So here's where the case actually stands tonight. The state autopsy is complete and sealed. It goes to the coroner, then into the case file. The sheriff's investigation continues, with roughly 60 witness interviews behind it and federal assistance alongside. When it closes, the whole file goes to a Jackson County grand jury, which again is what happens to nearly every death in that county, and is not a signal that charges are coming. That grand jury will decide whether what happened to Nolan Wells involved a crime. On the federal side, a separate track continues. The Bureau is working interstate threats received by multiple people connected to this case. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarce is the first person arrested on that track. He will not be the last, because he is already described as one of several accused of threatening a single family. And the civil side is now moving in parallel with both. A friend of Nolan's with a lawyer, cease and desist letters going out over content, an Ocean Springs family preparing action against creators. That's 3 separate legal tracks running at once: a county death investigation, a federal threats investigation, and private litigation over what's been published about people who haven't been charged with anything. Watch which one produces a resolution first. Right now, it isn't the one everybody's watching. If you're finding this useful, the fact-checked version, the one that tells you what's confirmed and what's a claim someone made online, subscribe. This case is going to move again the moment that grand jury convenes, and it's going to move fast when it does. 3.5 weeks of investigation, thousands of videos, millions of comments, named suspects, confident timelines, enhanced audio, theories with diagrams. And out of all of it, the first arrest in the Nolan Wells case is a 27-year-old man in Sacramento who has never been to Horn Island, charged over messages allegedly sent to a chancery judge who has no role in the investigation, whose stepson went on a boat trip. That's not a plot twist. That's a receipt. Because every one of those messages was built out of publicly circulated material. The blood, the boat, the certainty about who did what. Somebody consumed all of that, believed it completely, and decided a woman in Jackson County should be afraid to open her mail. And the underlying question, the one everybody claims to care about, is still unanswered. It's sitting in a sealed envelope with the state medical examiner's office, containing the 3 things the family's own pathologist couldn't examine. An 18-year-old went to an island on the 4th of July and did not come home. His parents have buried him without being told how he died. That is a real and terrible thing, and the demand for answers is completely legitimate. What's not legitimate is the certainty. Nobody outside that investigation has earned it. Not the people insisting it was murder, not the people insisting it was an accident, not the people who've decided which teenagers are lying based on a photograph. The only document that can settle it hasn't been opened yet. Until it is, everything else is a guess. And this week, one of those guesses turned into a federal charge. Next, whether Dr. Mitchell gets access to the state's findings before the grand jury sits, and what the toxicology in that sealed report actually says. Because that, more than anything anyone has posted, is what decides how this ends.
Any parent that would be in this situation, you would do anything to find out what happened to your child. And that is what we're here to do.
It is very important to note that this narrative, this suggestion that it was an accidental drowning, nothing to see here, is troubling, even if that's the case. There were 300 to 400 people out on Horns Island. You mean to tell me nobody saw anything? Nobody can tell us anything about what happened to one of the few black people that were out there on that island that day? It just doesn't add up. The fact that they're saying Nolan said that he would stay behind, but yet an 18-year-old kid would not want his cell phone if he was going to stay behind. The fact that...
Everything in this video is drawn from court documents, official statements, and reporting from established outlets. Current as of July 31st, 2026. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarce has been charged, not convicted, and is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells' death, and no individual named in this video has been accused by any authority of causing it. The official autopsy findings have not been released. Where we've described claims made online or in interviews, we've identified them as claims. This channel does not endorse contacting, harassing, or threatening anyone connected to this case, and, as this week demonstrated, doing so is a federal crime.